Boldface. Probably the most fearsome topic on the GMAT. But really, frankly, I don't think so. This topic is quite hyped up. The problem is that students do not have an organized approach for solving the boldface questions. By the end of the set of videos in this section, you will feel very, very confident about approaching boldface questions because you would have gained an organized and effective strategy for yourself. The basics. These are the 10 main concepts on GMAT Critical Reasoning, and now we are on boldface. The typical question stem is always this. In the argument, the portions in boldface play which of the following roles? The question is always about the role played by the boldface in the argument. The question will have a paragraph with one or two sets of bold-faced words, and the role of the bold-faced words in the argument would need to be identified. For example, this is the reasoning, and there are two sets of bold-faced words in the reasoning. The question is always this. In the argument given, the bold-faced portions play which of the following roles? And there are, of course, 5 answer choices. The correct strategy for these questions, something very, very important. Step 1. Identify the conclusion. Like in all the CR questions, identifying conclusion is very important. More so in the boldface questions. Step 2. Link the bold parts with the conclusion. Very, very important. And then step 3. Obtain a broad idea of expectation from the correct answer choice. One of the reasons why boldface questions appear to be so difficult is the vocabulary involved in the answer choices, the complexity in the language of the answer choices. If you don't have a very clear idea of what you are looking for in the answer choices, it is very natural to get confused amid the complexity. So step 1 was to identify the conclusion. Step 2, to link the bold parts with the conclusion. Step 3, have a clear idea of what you are expecting from the correct answer choice. And then step 4, as always, is to eliminate the answer choices. When you have eliminated 4 answer choices, the one that's left is the best of the lot. This is a session on reinforcing the vocabulary generally employed in the CR boldface questions. Importance of understanding the boldface vocabulary. So, if you see a question from the last video, you would remember it is about a reasoning with certain parts of it bold-faced. The question always asks you that what is the role played by the bold-faced portions in the reasoning? The strategy is to link the bold parts with the conclusion of the reasoning. Then have an idea of what you are expecting from the correct answer choice, and then go about eliminating the answer choices. This is where the vocabulary becomes very, very important. If you look at the answer choices, there are some particular words whose meaning is essential in getting to the right answer. You have to understand what a circumstance is, what an implication is, what the main conclusion is, what a conclusion is, what a finding is, things such as that. These are all nouns. Then you will find certain verbs also playing a key role. The ones marked in red here are the verbs. A thorough understanding of these nouns and the verbs will help you a lot in getting the boldface questions correct. So let's get down to mastering the vocabulary frequently involved in the boldface questions. Let's look at the nouns first. Conclusion is what the reasoning seeks to establish. Judgment is an opinion about someone or something. Prediction is a forecast about something. Evidence is a factual data that can be used for supporting or negating an argument. Fact is also on the same lines. Opinion is like a judgment. It is someone's point of view, which may or may not be correct. Main conclusion is what the argument seeks to establish. Generally, the term main conclusion would come when the reasoning also has an intermediate conclusion. Such paragraphs would have a term such as a conclusion, which would be an intermediate conclusion, and then main conclusion, which would be the overall conclusion of the argument. Main conclusion may agree with the intermediate conclusion, or it may disagree with the intermediate conclusion. This is a conclusion, the intermediate conclusion I was talking about. Circumstance is a condition generally relevant to an event or an action. Assumption is someone's hypothesis, which may or may not be correct. Consideration is a careful thought. Finding is a fact obtained after some effort. Explanation is an elucidation, a description. Objection is a point of disagreement. Claim is someone's assertion or opinion, generally not backed by a proof. Position is someone's strong point of view. So, these are the frequently asked nouns. Out of these, the ones marked in green are the most important ones. You have to be very clear about what conclusion, circumstance, evidence, fact, opinion, judgment, and assumption mean in particular. Now, these nouns will have a role to play in the reasoning. So very often, these nouns are paired with a verb. For example, one bold part may be an evidence that is used to support the argument. So evidence is the noun and support is the verb. So let's look at all the high-frequency verbs as well. To oppose is to weaken. To establish is to set up something. In context of reasoning, it would be to set up an opinion or a viewpoint. To evaluate is to examine. To imply is to suggest. To introduce is to bring up or talk about something new. To support is to help or assist an argument. To explain is to elucidate. To undermine is to weaken. To challenge is to oppose. To describe is to elucidate or explain. So these are the main verbs, and the ones highlighted in green are the high-frequency ones. So with this groundwork, let us get to testing how well you can apply this vocabulary on a live boldface question. This is the argument with one boldface, and you have to tell that what all of these can the bold part be. Please pause the video, read the argument carefully, and against each of these terms, put a check mark or a cross mark. The mind map is that GDP growth has been great. Party deserves credit for it. Party, however, has been soft on other issues and is not likely to win in the forthcoming elections. The boldface is the GDP of Zatora has grown by 15% during the tenure of the current political party. It is an occurrence. The argument is evaluating its implications, and the argument comes up with certain observations that are negative and leads to a conclusion that the party is not likely to win. So the main conclusion is not the bold part for sure. It's not a conclusion. A conclusion would come for some intermediate conclusion. It's a fact or finding, definitely a very fine choice. Opinion? Opinion is someone's personal point of view. This is a fact, not an opinion, the bold part. Is it a judgment? Again, judgment would be the outcome of someone's evaluation. That the GDP has grown is a finding, a fact, but not a judgment. Circumstance. Yes, it is an occurrence, an event, and therefore circumstance is a fine noun to come for it. Evidence. On the first look, one may think that it is a hardcore data, which can be used for supporting or negating an argument. However, the role of this data is not that of an evidence. So, in a different question, in a different argument, such a statement could very well have been an evidence. In this argument, its role is not of an evidence. Prediction? Definitely not. It is something that has happened. Prediction is for something that is going to happen in future. Assumption? Definitely not. It is a concrete data. Consideration is a deliberation or contemplation. So one may think that it is worth considering. However, if you come to think of the role of the boldface in this reasoning, it is not that of a consideration. So such a statement can be a consideration in some other reasoning, but in this particular one, this does not qualify as a consideration. So there are three fine terms that can come for this particular boldface. They are fact, finding, and circumstance. Out of these, the best ones are fact, finding, circumstance. Among the three, there is no clear winner. All are equally good. Look at the next one now. Look at this. The same paragraph, but a different part has been boldfaced. These are the nouns. Please pause the video and put a check or a cross mark against each of these. The mind map remains the same. The boldface is the GDP growth is a fine indication of the economic growth of a nation. Is this the main conclusion? Definitely not. This is a consideration that has been used to reach an intermediate conclusion, that the party must be applauded for its growth in GDP. So a conclusion is not a good choice. Fact? One may think that this is a fine choice. That GDP growth is a fine indication of the economic growth of a nation is a judgment, opinion, consideration, but it is a universal truth of sorts, and therefore at times it can be referred to as fact. It is a moderate choice. I would say we will have to hold it, but on the GMAT, there would always be a stronger choice. Fact is a neutral choice. It's neither incorrect nor correct. Opinion? Definitely. Judgment? Definitely. Circumstance? No, it is not a peculiar event as such. It is a universal truth that GDP growth is a fine indication of the economic growth of a nation. Circumstance, therefore, is a bad choice. Evidence? Not at all. Evidence is a peculiar data or event. Prediction? No, it is a universal truth. It is not a prediction. Assumption? Some students may think it is an assumption, but no, it is a universal truth. It cannot be considered an assumption. Consideration? Definitely. It is something that has been used for deliberation upon reaching a conclusion that the party must be applauded for its role in the growth in GDP. So these are the fine choices. Out of these, consideration would be the best. Because of the universal nature of this statement, that GDP growth is a fine indication, opinion, or judgment become weak choices. Such statements would be used for consideration for reaching a conclusion. Look at this one now. Please pause the video and put cross or check mark against each of these terms. Mind map remains the same. The boldface is, the party must be applauded for its role. So this is an intermediate conclusion that has been reached. It's not the main conclusion, but a conclusion suggesting an intermediate conclusion fits very well. It is not a fact. It is someone's opinion that the party must be applauded. Fact is not correct. Opinion? Definitely. Judgment? Yes. The author thinks that the party must be applauded. Maybe someone else thinks that party should not be applauded, as the credit lies somewhere else. Therefore, the boldface is author's opinion or judgment. Circumstance? Not at all. Circumstance is an occurrence, an event. The boldface here is a judgment. Evidence? Not at all. An opinion can never be an evidence. Prediction? No. Assumption? Bad choice. Consideration is an okay-ish choice because the author has considered this intermediate conclusion in reaching the final conclusion, that despite this good part, the party is not likely to win. However, that is a weak choice. There are three strong choices: a conclusion, opinion, and judgment. Out of these, a conclusion suggesting an intermediate conclusion is the best by a distance, because this choice best summarizes the role of the boldface. The construction is that something positive was said, an intermediate conclusion was reached, a conclusion was reached, and later on, something negative was said. The main conclusion of the argument is a negative outcome for the party. A conclusion is the best of these. However, depending on the question construction, sometimes opinion or judgment could also work. Look at this one now. Please pause the video and put a check or cross mark against each of these. Recent opinion polls would reflect some data, and therefore options such as evidence are likely to work very well. This is not the main conclusion. This is not the intermediate conclusion. This is a fact as well. Opinion? No. Judgment? No. Circumstance? Yes, but a weak choice. Evidence? Definitely. Prediction? No. Assumption? Definitely not. This is a concrete result. Consideration? A weak choice. So these are the results, friends. Out of these, definitely evidence is the strongest. Look at this one. Now please pause the video and put your marks against each of these. This is definitely the main conclusion. This is not an intermediate conclusion. This is not fact. This is definitely someone's opinion, the author's opinion. This is definitely the author's judgment. This is not a circumstance. This is definitely not an evidence. This is a very fine prediction, not an assumption, not a consideration. These nouns can be used for the given boldface. The best of these is definitely the main conclusion, because this represents the main point of the argument, the reason why the argument was made. Let's get down to applying the strategy for the boldface on a live question. A quick recap of the strategy. Step 1. Identify the conclusion of the reasoning. Step 2. Link the bold parts with the conclusion. Step 3. Know what you are going to look for in the answer choices. Step 4. Eliminate 4 choices. The one that's left is the correct answer choice. Application of the strategy on a live question. This is the reasoning. This is the standard question stem every time. The two bold-faced portions play which of the following roles? Please pause the video and read the reasoning carefully. The mind map is that GDP growth has been great. Party deserves credit. However, party has been soft on other issues and is not likely to win in the forthcoming elections. What is the conclusion? The second bold part is the conclusion, that the party is unlikely to win another term in the forthcoming elections. so the second bold part has already been linked. This itself is the conclusion of the argument. Let's connect the first bold part with the conclusion. So, come to think of it, it is an event that has happened. And now the author is trying to evaluate the implications of this event. And in the process of doing that, the author ends up comparing the performance of the government in other areas and ends up concluding that the party is unlikely to win. So this is the connection, friends. Let's look at the answer choices. The first is a circumstance whose implication the argument seeks to evaluate. Perfect. The second is the main conclusion. Awesome. This is a very fine answer choice. Look at this one now. The first is a finding that the argument seeks to evaluate. All right. The second part, the second opposes the finding. The second does not say that the GDP did not grow by 15%. So the second part is not correct. Bad answer choice. Look at this one now. Many students will contemplate about this one. That the second is the main conclusion is perfectly all right. But that the first is a fact that opposes the main conclusion is not the role that the first boldface is playing in the reasoning, and this is not a good answer choice. Look at this one now. First is a finding that helps derive a conclusion. A conclusion, remember, is the intermediate conclusion, which is the case. The intermediate conclusion here is that the party must be applauded for its role. However, to say that the second is that conclusion would be incorrect. The second is the main conclusion of the reasoning. A conclusion is referring to the part that says that the party must be applauded for its role. Bad answer choice. Look at the next one now. The first is a finding that helps derive a conclusion. Yes, the intermediate conclusion we were just talking about. The second is the main conclusion. This choice may need some deliberation, but you will realize that this is also a perfectly fine answer choice. So see, there can be different answer choices correct for the same reasoning for the same boldfaces. However, on the GMAT, only one such correct answer choice would appear. Look at the next one now. Same reasoning, but the boldfaces are different. Please pause the video and link each of the boldfaces with the main conclusion of the passage. Now look at the answer choices. The first is an intermediate conclusion reached by the argument. Right. The second is an evidence that supports the main conclusion of the argument. This is perfectly all right. A good answer choice. One more. Once again, the boldfaces are different. The reasoning is the same. Please pause the video and link these boldfaces with the conclusion. The first is a consideration that supports an intermediate conclusion that the argument reaches. Consideration is a fine word for the boldface that the GDP growth is a fine indication of the economy growth of a nation, and yes, it is supporting an intermediate conclusion that the party must be applauded for its role. So first part of this answer choice is all right. Look at the second part. The second is a judgment. It's perceived softness on long-standing social and diplomatic issues. Judgment is a fine word for it. And yes, this judgment is leading to the main conclusion, that the party is unlikely to win another term in the forthcoming elections. Therefore, this is a fine answer choice. Step 1. Figure out the conclusion of the argument. What is the conclusion? The first boldface itself is the conclusion. Step 2. Link the two boldfaces with the conclusion. Now, first boldface itself is the conclusion. The second boldface is part of an example that has been used to support the conclusion. Hence, this is the relationship. First boldface itself is the conclusion. Second boldface is part of an example that supports the conclusion. Remember, you don't have to take the notes. It is not advisable. I'm doing this just to explain in detail because this is an application of concept video. If I were to solve this question on the exam, I would not be taking this step of writing things down. So, with this groundwork here, let's approach the answer choices. Yes, the first boldface is the conclusion of the argument. The second is an opinion that provides support for that conclusion. Can this be called an opinion? It provides support, but is it an opinion? No, this is a concrete fact stated here. So this is not an opinion. Something like evidence will work better. Look at choice B. The first is the conclusion of the argument. Yes, that's correct. The second is evidence that provides support for that conclusion. You see that yes, this is in sync with our groundwork here. The vocabulary used is a bit different, which is likely to happen, but this is a very strong answer choice. Look at choice C now. First is not a premise that provides support for the conclusion. First is the conclusion itself. So this is not right. No, second is not a conclusion. Second is something that provides support or evidence for the conclusion. So C is a bad answer choice. Look at choice D now. No, both cannot be called premise. First is the conclusion, so D is wrong. Similarly, no, both cannot be called evidence because the first boldface is the conclusion. Let's confirm choice B once. We know that this is the main conclusion of the argument, and this is something that supports the conclusion. In choice B, you have the first is the conclusion of the argument. That is right. And then the second is evidence. See, it is a concrete fact here, all of this from here to here. Therefore, yes, it can be called an evidence. So yes, the second is evidence that provides support for that conclusion. That conclusion, as in the conclusion of the argument, the first boldface. Yes, that's correct. B is the correct answer choice. Look at this one. Step 1 is to identify the conclusion of the argument. What is the conclusion here? This last part of the sentence suggests that those arguing for softer coaching at the highest level must rethink, and therefore the conclusion is that strict training is desirable. We know the conclusion. Step 2 is to link each boldface with this conclusion. How is the first boldface related to this conclusion? The first boldface here is an intermediate conclusion. See, this is preceded by therefore here, and the entire reasoning here from here to here. Therefore, this is an intermediate conclusion. And the main conclusion opposes this intermediate conclusion. So, first boldface is an intermediate conclusion, and it is opposed by the main conclusion. You don't have to take notes on the exam. I'm writing it just for your conceptual clarity, as this is an application of concept video. How is this second boldface related to the conclusion? This is something which is in support of the main conclusion. So, second boldface is a consideration which is in support of the main conclusion. With this groundwork, let's look at the answer choices. The first boldface is not the main conclusion. It is an intermediate conclusion. Yes, the second boldface opposes, in a way, this intermediate conclusion, but this conclusion is not the main conclusion. Answer choice A should be eliminated. Look at answer choice B. Yes, the first boldface is a conclusion. It's a good term here, a conclusion for the intermediate conclusion. And yes, the argument seeks to oppose this intermediate conclusion. So the first part is all right. And the second part here, the second is a consideration. Yes, it is a consideration presented to support the main conclusion of the argument. This is exactly in sync with what we were expecting. This is in sync with our groundwork here. This is likely the correct answer choice. Let's still look at other answer choices. Choice C. The first is a conclusion, yes. That the argument seeks to oppose, yes. So the first part is all right. Second part. The second is the main conclusion of the argument. No, the second is not a conclusion itself. Second is something that supports the main conclusion. The conclusion is here, the last sentence of the argument. So choice C is not correct. Look at choice D. First is not a consideration as such. It is an intermediate conclusion, and it has not been used to oppose the main conclusion of the argument. Yes, the argument opposes the first boldface, but the role of the first boldface is not to oppose the main conclusion of the argument. It is just an intermediate conclusion. So this is not right. And then it says the second is evidence. It is not entirely correct to call it an evidence. You see, this says that lack of something may outmode tomorrow. So this is a prediction. A prediction cannot be an evidence, so even this part is incorrect. Look at choice E now. No, first has not been used to support the main conclusion of the argument. The main conclusion opposes the first boldface, so this part is absolutely incorrect. Then it says that the second is a consideration presented to support the main conclusion of the argument. Yes, the second part is correct, but the first part is absolutely wrong. Choice E is incorrect. Let's confirm choice B once more. We know this is the conclusion here. This is an intermediate conclusion, and this is a consideration that has been used to support the main conclusion of the argument. Choice B says the first is a conclusion, as in an intermediate conclusion, that the argument seeks to oppose. Yes, you see, this intermediate conclusion is opposite of what the main conclusion is. So this part is perfectly all right. Then the second is a consideration. Yes, this is a consideration, a prediction which can be called a consideration, presented to support the main conclusion of the argument. Yes, this part has been used to support the main conclusion of the argument, which has been stated in the last sentence of the paragraph. B is the correct answer choice. The final session on critical reasoning boldface questions. A re-emphasis on the key points. Don't be scared. First of all, the questions are very, very logical, and 100% accuracy is possible. Just to make you feel confident, let me tell you that I have practically never got a boldface question incorrect, and often I am able to solve these questions in 1 minute or less. Master the strategy that we covered in the earlier videos. Identify the conclusion. Link bold parts with the conclusion. Very important. Have an idea of what you are expecting from the answer choices. This is particularly crucial in the bold-faced questions, because otherwise, the complexity, the vocabulary, and the answer choices will confuse you badly. Next, master the vocabulary involved. If needed, watch the Reinforcing the Vocabulary video a couple of times. As always, use grid for eliminating the answer choices. When you eliminate 4 answer choices, the one that's left is the best among the given answer choices,